So here we are, guys. We are on the final 2 weeks of the regular season for the NCPL Commander Draft. We're on number 17 of the draft analysis series. We're going to be looking at Paul Arthur's team. Interestingly enough, another team that, while the performance hasn't been probably where Paul wants it, this team actually has a lot going for it. It's actually quite a versatile team. It kind of has a lot of areas covered in it. And of course, there's things that are lacking in the team, which I will mention later on. But overall, I scored Paul's team a total of 40. Um, Now, I was kind of like looking at it, I was like 40. But I was trying to set aside the performance of the team and what the team can actually do, because what the team can actually do is really good. We'll start with the offense, which I scored 7. So obviously you have Tornadus I as his captain, and definitely an offensive Pokemon, having tons of coverage and being able to be a mixed attacker or special or physical. It has Bulk Up, Crunch, Brick Break, Aerial Ace, Air Slash, Extra Sensory, Grass Knot, Sludge Bomb, Nasty Plot, Knockoff, Heat Wave, Hurricane, Focus Blast, U-Turn. The list goes on, and then you get Hidden Power as well. So the things that Torn can do and bring can basically match any matchup, which is really great. The downside, of course, is that Tornadus being flying, it is more than likely going to need to run heavy-duty boots in all cases, just to keep it alive, since it doesn't have Roost either. This Pokemon had Roost, it definitely wouldn't be as low a tier as it is, especially with heavy-duty boots being introduced. Because what makes Torn Eye, the flying, so good is he gets Prankster. I mean, the what is it? Thunderous also gets Prankster, but he's kind of better typing, the Electric Stab. But Torn getting Prankster and having him as a captain is great. You can utilize Prankster Defog, Prankster Bulk Up, Prankster Taunt, and some other things that I wrote down that might be interesting and useful. Is Prankster Confide. If you need to, if you know he has a really strong special attacker, you can use this to deter it, especially if it's going to be used to switch in on this Torn. Another thing too that people forget is Rest Sleep Talk. I know it sounds cheesy, but especially with a Pokemon with Prankster, Rest always goes first, and Sleep Talk always goes first. So you're getting priority in the Sleep Talk because of Prankster. And yes, that's how it works. I have tested that, so it's a really, really great combination with Prankster. Getting that Sleep Talk priority, you could run it with Hurricane, you could run it with Air Slash, you could run it with Nasty Plot, Air Slash. It's endless what you can do. So Tornadus is a huge threat to everybody's team. But yeah, so next on the list for offensive Pokemon here, the offensive Pokemon that I'm going to mention are Meloetta, Scrafty, Electivire, Lilligant, Mega Banette, Muck, and Silvally Water. So, Meloetta, we have talked about before. The ability that it has in Relic Song and being able to switch its type from normal Psychic to normal Fighting is awesome, because it doesn't just switch its type, it switches its attack and special attack. It becomes a special attacker to a physical attacker, and in my opinion, a physical wall breaker, and what he needs to utilize more on his team, since it does need a wall breaker. But the Serene Grace has helped out Meloetta a lot, being able to get those Spit F boosts if it needs it, and it's really sneaky, but Relic Song does have a 10% chance to sleep, plus the Serene Grace, so that's going to be really annoying if that hits somebody, but that is something that can happen. Meloetta also getting access to U-Turn, Calm Mind, so a very viable Pokemon to set up, especially with its stats being so high. I'll get those for you. So Meloetta regular form, we have base 100 HP, 77 defense, 128 special defense. That's very high. And then in Periette form, we have, I hope I pronounced that right. I probably didn't. But in that form, we have 100 base HP, 90 defense, and 77 SPDF. So still very bulky, even in its normal fighting form. Overall, a very hard Pokemon to prepare for. You definitely don't know the set that it's going to bring. Although, if it does bring Relic Song, chances are it's not going to be choice locked because it's going to be switching between types, and physical and special. It's going to need to be able to utilize the next move in its lineup there. So, down the line, we have Scrafty. Now, I've seen Scrafty perform really well and really not useful. But Scrafty actually has a lot of tools to. Just get my notes here. Scrafty has a lot of tools to actually be a sweeper, with its defenses being so good, and then access to Shed Skin, Intimidate, and Moxie. You can utilize any three of those to set up, but having access to Dragon Dance, Drain Punch, Close Combat, Knockoff, Dragon Tail, Fire Punch, Iron Head, Poison Jab, Rock Slide, Ice Punch. I mean, it can cover a lot, really anything. And then you have, it's kind of more utility defensive, but still, kind of offensive sets. You have Rest, Bulk Up, Toxic, Foul Play, and then Fake Out. So very, very good options on this Pokemon. Now, its times 4 weakness to Fairy is no good, but the thing is there's not very many Fairies in this draft. And as you can see, Paul did draft Muck that helped deal with that Fairy weakness that Scrafty has. Easily switch into Muck on a Fairy. No problem at all. Even if the Fairy boosts, Muck can easily come in and probably deal with it. Now, Muck, unlike Alolan Muck, doesn't get Clear Smog, which kind of sucks, but at the same time, Muck still has high attack. You can definitely still take out a Fairy type with his stab, and then Poison Touch just being an amazing ability that just makes it easier to take out those Fairy types. So, but Scrafty, very potent. Gets that Dragon Dance up, has Drain Punch for recovery, and then we got Moxie to really, really lock in that win. So, definitely a Pokemon to be feared, especially behind screens, which I will mention going down the list here. We're going to move on to Electivire. So, I will mention the defensive set regarding like Scrafty setup and Meloetta setup for Electivire in the defensive section, but I think Electivire is, in my opinion, very important to this team and how this team performs, as well as Shuckle. But I think Electivire is a very, very hidden gem on this team that can be very, very useful. So, but offensively on his own, Electivire has Motor Drive, which you can absorb an electric attack. Your speed will be boosted by 1. I mean, kind of useful. He's got Tornadoes. He does have Silvally Water. Makes it harder for the opponent to want to just click Thunderbolt or Volt Switch or Hidden Power Electric. But generally, the opponent is going to kind of sniff that out first. So, but Electivire being able to be physical or mixed, kind of like Meloetta and Tornadus, does have access to Flamethrower, Volt Switch, Earthquake, Focus Blast, Iron Tail, Ice Punch, Brick Break, Cross Chop, Curse, and a couple other moves, but those are generally the moves that you're going to see, especially Volt Switch and Flamethrower and EQ. So that's really, really all we're gonna see offensively in terms of just attacking raw power from Electivire. Now, Electivire does have decent attack. He can try to be a wall breaker. I just feel like this team needs a heavier wall breaker, in my opinion. That's gonna have stronger stab than yeah. The wild charge is 90, but at the same time it's 90 and has 1/4 recoil. And still not spammable since there's Volt Absorbers and ground types roaming around. and grass types as well. So it makes it hard to be spammed and be a wall breaker. So, but next up we have Lilligant or Lilligant. So Lilligant, while it's as we know, its move pool is quite low. It has Leaf Storm, Giga Drain, Hidden Power. That's really yeah, it's just grass moves. So it does have Pollen Puff as well. That's really where it ends. So it would have been really good if this Pokemon got Weather Ball as well, especially since it's got Chlorophyll. But anyways, this Pokemon has Quiver Dance. Quiver Dance is always a threat because it boosts speed, special defense, and special attack. With access to Hidden Power, you can definitely make this viable. There isn't too many Sap Supers out there, so if you can run something like Quiver Dance, Giga Drain, Toxic, and Synthesis to make sure that you can take out those threats that are going to be able to come in and wall Lilligant easily. Definitely, Toxic would be able to deal with that. So Lilligant always being a threat. Quiver Dance is always terrifying. But the thing with Lilligant is you definitely know what's going to be coming. To 80% of the matches, I would say, is it does have some defensive options, which I will get into later. But as for the next offensive Pokemon, we have Mega Banette. Now, Mega Banette has an enormous attack stat at 165. This is what I was mentioning in the Wall Breaker. So I think for Paul's team, he needs somebody to break down some threats because this team struggles with heavily invested bulky teams if not built correctly. So it struggles with those teams at face value, but it has ways to easily deal with those teams. So it really comes down to the owner and how they build that team against those bulky teams. But Mega Banette is the only, in my opinion, wall breaker that he really has. The problem with it is it doesn't really have a strong stab. Now, Ghost offense is good, but the problem is when you only have Shadow Claw at base 70, it's okay. It's not the worst. But if you had something like Stab EQ or Stab Hurricane, I mean those things are what really hurt. Like if this thing got Poltergeist, very excuse me, very spammable. So Mega Banette having Prankster also allows it to use Destiny Bond, Taunt, and then offensive options we have Gunk Shot, we have Knockoff. What else do we have? Infestation is an interesting one. That was good for it. Pursuit, Sucker Punch, and also I want to look at. Yeah, it has 93 special attack. That's not that bad. It can definitely run a special attack if it needs to, like Thunderbolt or something like that. But the Banette is definitely going to be using Destiny Bond. It's got Will-O-Wisp, utilizing that with Prankster, Toxic, Thunderwave. I mean, these are the things that you're going to kind of see from it, like utility offense. Unfortunately, we would like to see Wall Breaker. It just doesn't have the moves available to it to make it a Wall Breaker. Now, if that 165 base attack was in special attack and it was able to spam Shadow Ball, different story. I think that would be totally viable. Especially because especially because it gets Calm Mind. So I mean, you could Calm Mind as well since it has Prankster. You can definitely get it up first. I am curious. Does anybody know if Pain Split works with Prankster? I'm curious if Pain Split always goes first. If that's the case, I definitely think a Pain Split, Calm Mind, Shadow Ball set might be really viable on it with Will-O-Wisp or something like that. Pain Split, Calm Mind, Shadow Ball, Will-O-Wisp. If they don't have any normal types, that's going to be extremely hard to deal with. And I just also wanted to mention, it does have Cotton Guard. So and Prankster Cotton Guard at that. So Cotton Guard, Rest, Sleep Talk, Nightshade is a totally viable option that I think would be extremely hard to deal with, prepared or not. So if they don't have a normal type. So definitely, Paul, if you're watching this, definitely look out for that type of build on Mega Banette. If you don't see a normal type, I definitely think that's a viable build. They can't trick you. They can't lock you into a move. The only option is for them to taunt you, which definitely would destroy that set. But at the same time, that can easily be fished out. You can see how many Pokemon have taunt on his team and go from there. Next up, anyways, we have Muck. As I said, Muck is the fairy deterrent on this team. It can deal with fairies because the fairies are strong. While there isn't many, the fairies are strong in this draft. Muck having just its standard stuff, Poison Touch, Sticky Hold, Setup, Punch Coverage, and Ice Punch, Fire Punch, Thunder Punch. Assault Vest set is money with it, and then you have a Choice Band set if you need it as well. Muck is totally bulky enough to just run Band if it needs to, with the base 105 HP, base 75 defense, base 100 special defense. Totally viable to run just a Band if it wants to. Like I said, this team struggles with bulkier teams, so having those bands and those ways to break through those teams is super important for this group of Pokemon. Last but not least, we have Silvally, and you guys, we all know Silvally. It has Parting Shot, it has U-Turn, Multi-Attack, Ice Beam, Flamethrower, Draco Meteor, and then it has Swords Dance, Work Up, and Flame Charge. But generally, the Defog Parting Shot set is super useful for Paul on this team. That way it allows Tornadus to be a little bit more tricky and mix up his sets a bit more instead of just being heavy duty boots defog. Since Silvally Water especially is a great defogger, and having that multi-attack water stab at a base 120 is really good. So I hope we continue to see that, and that water fire coverage is kind of annoying as well. So but next up we have the defense, which I scored an 8. So this team covers its bases really well in terms of if somebody's weak to something, there's a specific Pokemon to cover that. Scrafty, we have Muck. Electivire, we have Lilligant or Tornadus. Tornadus and Silvally Water, we have Electivire, and we have Lilligant as well. Lilligant being weak to ice, but the electric is what I'm referring to. And then we have Shuckle, of course, I believe, to deter the ice type. And then you have, Assault Vest Muck as well. So a lot of bases covered here. Definitely a good defense. So we have Shuckle, we have Muck. You could bring defensively, defensive utility. We have McBanette as defensive utility, and then you have Silvally Water and Scrafty's defensive utility. So just going to my notes here. Don't forget, we do have Tornadus as well. Does have Defog and Confide and some other defensive moves. But generally, the defensive sets that you're going to see from Tornadus are going to be with Defog and 3 attacks or U-Turn. Shuckle, we have, of course, standard Shuckles, Sticky Web, Stealth Rock, Encore, Infestation, Toxic Knockoff. I definitely don't think there's any other set to run with Shuckle. You just have to pick and choose your times to send it out, since it is setup fodder. We also have Scrafty, which I mentioned earlier, having Intimidate, Shed Skin, and Moxie. But that Intimidate is really annoying. Switch in super bulky Pokemon, Intimidate, Fake Out, Dragon Tail them, keep phasing them out, chipping them down so that your team can deal with these bulky teams that are for sure going to be brought every single time you're versing. So chipping those teams down and wall breaking them is going to be very important to this team. Now to the highlight of the defense, in my opinion. Now, I know you could say it's Shuckle. He has a Sticky Webs. He can help the team. The team's fast. Now, Sticky Webs is good. But what Electivire can do, in my opinion, is much better for all, in my opinion. Electivire having the speed to pull this off as well. Electivire gets access to both screens and teleport with a base 95 speed, base 85 special defense, 67 or base 85 special defense, 67 defense, which is not that great, and base 75 HP. But you can easily set up screens on a utility defensive Pokemon or just a defensive Pokemon. Even an offensive Pokemon, depending on what it is, set up the screen, probably set up first since he's base 95 speed, which is pretty good. Set up a reflect, set up a light screen with light clay, teleport out, go right into Meloetta, set up, sub set up. Has enormous bulk in both stats, ton of HP, be really hard to break that sub. Tornadus can do it as well with Nasty Plot. You can do it with Lilligant. You can do it with Mega Banette. You could do it with Silvally with Swords Dance. You could do it with Muck. I totally think this is a super good set for his team. His team wants to set up and it wants to sweep. Once it sets up, it can easily blow by those bulky teams with ease, no problem. The coverage that Meloetta has, the coverage that Tornadus has, the coverage that Scrafty has, the coverage that Banette has, it's enough. And the coverage that Muck has, it's enough. And then, of course, Silvally just having all sorts of coverage. So this, I think, is very important for him in getting some high differential wins. I think this would be really, really useful. I totally hope I see this set. As for Electivire's other defensive options, I don't think there is too much that I would mention outside of that. I think this is the focal point of his defensive options here. He has Toxic and T-Wave, but man, setting up his screens and teleporting out, getting that advantage switch, that would be really, really good. That would be such a saving grace for anybody. Everybody likes a teleport switch, right? It's really, really hard to counter. So I really hope I see that. I would love to see a big Scrafty sweep, big Meloetta sweep, not on me, or Tornadus sweep or Lilligant sweep. Since you have these Pokemon available to you, and I don't think you've only made one trade, I believe. Yeah, you've only made one trade, so if you're not going to trade these Pokemon away, I really think you should utilize them to the best of their abilities, and a lot of them have great setup potential, so I really think you should utilize that in your team. I think it would be great. But yes, I won't rant on too long. I found that, I thought it was really interesting, and I thought it was really powerful. So, but Lilligant in its defensive options, I think are actually pretty good. I was quite surprised. It does have Sleep Pattern. Now, the move that I think is really good for it was Healing Wish. So if you do this type of set with Electivire, and you have screens and teleport, you can bring Lilligant as a Healing Wish, and then you can set up with whoever you're setting up. So you do your screens, you have Healing Wish on Lilligant, you go into Meloetta sets up, breaks through like two Pokemon, maybe just one or three, you get Toxic, or you get hit really hard, and you're like, fuck, I need to save Meloetta. I think Meloetta's still good in this match. You switch out, you get around to Lilligant, you get that Healing Wish in, Meloetta's back to full, no Toxic, no T-Wave, no Wisp, or Burn. Super, super viable option. This team wants to set up, it wants to be able to sweep teams, it wants to get those high differential wins, so I think that would be a really, really great addition to team building, is bringing that Healing Wish and letting you set up twice potentially. So but it also has Leech Seed, Protect, Synthesis. I mean, it can totally pull that off. I don't recall yeah, it does have Toxic, so you could definitely pull off like a Leech Seed, Protect. They have Grass type, just run Toxic, Protect, Synthesis. Giga Drain, super annoying. Very, very annoying to deal with if you weren't prepared. And I think Lilligant has, Lilligant base 90 speed. That would be extremely annoying to deal with. Max speed, max HP, run that Leech Seed, Protect. That would be super, super irritating. But moving down the list here, we have Mega Banette. We mentioned kind of its utility stuff earlier. Having Prankster with Destiny Bond, Taunt, Wisp, T-Wave, Trick Room, Pain Split. Cotton Guard Nightshade would be really annoying. And like I mentioned with the where is it? Tornado set, having Prankster, you have rest, sleep talk. So rest, sleep talk, Cotton Guard, Nightshade. You know how annoying that would be? You get priority Nightshade. That would be so annoying, right? I think that would be a super phenomenal set with Mega Banette. But also, it does have Prankster Disable, which would be very annoying as well. You can do, basically what Calvin did, except have Hex. You could do Disable, Hex, Toxic, or Disable, Hex, T-Wave, Disable, Hex, Will-O-Wisp. All of them are viable. It would be extremely irritating. You could run Pain Split too, just to be extra annoying, or whatever coverage you need. But yes, very annoying. I think that is a very good utility type set, and it would really help this team deal with some defensive bulky checks. It would be extremely hard to deal with if you're getting Toxic and then Hexed, that base 130. Swear, yeah, base 130. So it doubles off of 65. But yeah. And then you have Muck. It just, Muck has Sticky Hold, Poison Touch. I mean, they can be defensive options if you just want to Poison Jab things and get that Toxic, or keep your Black Sludge on and keep healing, protect, kind of do what Jared did. Have that Protect Toxic stall going on, especially with its Poison Touch. It's super easy to do and be able to run other moves and not have to have Toxic on your actual set. Now, one thing I did notice is while this Muck doesn't get Clear Smog, it gets Haze. So unfortunately, it's not an attack, but at the same time, Muck can totally deal with setup and help his team deal with setup itself. So interesting note as well. Sorry, I didn't note every single move like I normally do, but Muck has Memento, and yeah. So Mega Banette didn't. Muck has Memento, and like I said, this team wants to set up and wants to get those 6-0 sweeps, wants to get those big sweeps. So Memento is another option. If you don't need that fourth slot, throw Memento on there, and you can give it an all or nothing Hail Mary shot. You Memento, get your setup Pokemon in on the opponent. They're either gonna have to switch or try and Toxic you, because they're going to be -2 in both attack and special attack from the Memento. So definitely another viable option. I think my point with this is this team wants to set up. This team's defensive Pokemon want to help its team set up, not so much just be there to absorb moves, because his offensive Pokemon can switch into each other really well, i.e. Electivire and Lilligant. Electivire and Tornadus, Scrafty and Muck, Silvally Water and Lilligant as well. Last but not least, we have Silvally Water. Silvally Water having, Parting Shot, Defog, U-Turn. That's really all you're going to see. I wouldn't mix up that Silvally set too much. So, but yeah, next up we have Speed. I scored this a 9. Now he has terrific speed control and terrific speed. So Sticky Web, speed control, Motor Drive, Quiver Dance, Dragon Dance, Prankster on 2 Mons, and then Silvally having 317, and then Mega Banette having Mega Banette having base 75, Lilligant having base 90, Electivire having base 95, and then Meloetta, of course, having base 90 in regular form and 128 in the fighting form, and then Torrentee to round it all off at 15, 111, and Prankster. So a very fast team, and Webs are there if he's going to be coming across a faster team or a faster all across the board team, i.e. Matt. Webs are there for insurance. But Yes, the team's overall speed is actually really good, and the amount of speed setup and speed control it has is super phenomenal as well. One of the faster teams on the board here, so speed is definitely to his advantage. Helps him set up, helps him pivot with that Meloetta, that Tornadus, and that Silvally and Electivire. So definitely a strong team in terms of speed. Next, we have Hazards. I rated a 9 as well. You have that Stealth Rocks and Sticky Web in the Shuckle, and you have Hazard Control in the Prankster. Defog from Tornadus. You have Defog from Silvally, both very reliable defoggers. Although Tornadus having to run heavy duty boots kind of sucks, but at the same time, totally doable. The amount of speed control, the amount of hazards and the reliable hazard control he has, I think this is easily a 9. If Shuckle's coming, rocks are coming out 100%. You're never gonna one-shot Shuckle. I think there's only a couple Pokemon in actual like OU tiers and down that can actually one-shot Shuckle. And then Shuckle to bypass, like taunts and stuff like that, it can run the Mental Herb. So basically, if Shuckle's coming, rocks or webs are coming up. So in my opinion, that's a very close to 10 in terms of hazards. But 10 would be, like one of the other teams I rated where they had tons of hazard control, tons of hazards to set up, all the Pokemon. You never knew which Pokemon was going to be the hazard control. So that's a 10 to me when there's multiple and it's just hard to know which one's going to be which. So but last but not least, on our rank board here, we have Momentum. I scored this a 7. So his team's momentum, it does have a lot of momentum in setup, but the problem is this team needs to be able to set up, and it seems like it has a hard time. I'm trying to separate what I've seen and what I'm looking at right now, but the team wants to set up, but getting it to set up, the defensive Pokemon don't have pivoting moves. Like, Shuckle doesn't have pivoting. You have to hard switch out, and generally a Pokemon that's out in front of Shuckle is either setting up or they're about to hit Shuckle really hard. So you almost kind of have to martyr Shuckle. And then you have Silvally as well. Silvally does have Parting Shot and U-Turn. Parting Shot definitely helps way more. But getting this offense going is what I find the problem the most. It's the slowest. Not the slowest. It's slow at getting it started. But aside from that, in the momentum, he does have U-Turn on Tornadus. He does have Volt Switch on Electivire, and he has U-Turn on Meloetta and U-Turn Parting Shot on Silvally. So he has a lot of momentum in that regard. But the setup and the snowball momentum is good. I just find it has a little bit of a hard time setting up since, Scrafty has a 4 times weakness to Fairy. You run Hidden Power Fairy, it's gonna hurt, right? And then Lilligant only having really grass moves and Hidden Power, and Meloetta. I mean, Meloetta has great coverage, so Meloetta is the best, in my opinion, out of them to be the sweeper here because the coverage and the bulk. But definitely hard to get this going and choose which one you want to be sweeper. I find is probably what's happening sometimes in team building. Who am I going to sweep? How do I switch this in? How am I going to get it to do this? Those are the problems I see. But overall, I scored Paul's team of 40. I think he has a good team. I think he's just got to utilize it in the way that he's got it here. There's all these setup Pokemon. Bring them. Set up with 2 of them, 3 of them. Set up those screens. Get that teleport. Get a free switch in. Get that Parting Shot off. Or bring something crazy like that Cotton Guard Nightshade. If Prankster Sleep Talk with Cotton Guard and Nightshade, I mean, that would be extremely annoying. Needs to start bringing stuff like that to get these big wins, these differential wins, that the team that he's drafted to set up and get these big differential wins, that's what it wants to do. And, you got to take full advantage of that. And when you have a team like this, screens are so good, especially in draft. It's just, screens are almost impossible to counter sometimes. You make one wrong move and a screen's up, done. Your opponent's setting up, the opponent gets one boost in defense or special defense, and it boosts its attack, done. That's you're gonna lose half your team, or you're gonna outright lose. So definitely take that to your advantage. And ooh, scheiße. We'll see you guys on number 18.